Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today, we will be doing a weekend review for this weekend, October 13th through the 15th, 2017. The weekend estimates just came in this morning, so we will walk through those and then do some deep dives, perhaps on the bigger movies and new releases, and a couple of limited releases or kind of semi-limited releases, so we'll talk about those as well. But let's dive right into it. So going into this weekend, I think most people thought that, me included, Happy Death Day would have a little bit of a breakout. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, and I'll have to look at my podcast listing here, I believe I said 22.5 for Happy Death Day. I was optimistic. It wasn't on a ton of screens. It was only on 3,150 screens, which is still a wide release, but it's not a super wide release by any stretch of the imagination. The production budget was only $4.8 million. This is from Blumhouse again. Like, they are just on fire. So coming out of the weekend, estimates were basically just about 20, high teens into the low 20s. I said on the higher end, 22.5. Coming in today, the official number is 26.5 million for Happy Death Day, from Universal Studios in a partnership with Blumhouse. So I believe Blumhouse Productions creates the films, does all the hard nitty-gritty production, and then Universal is the distributor and probably helps out a lot with marketing in terms of those costs. But anyway you slice it, Happy Death Day has done a fantastic opening here for this weekend. Especially surprising since it was on less than 3,500 screens. I'm not sure what happened here. I feel like this should have been on the higher end, at least 3,300, but for whatever reason it came in at only about 3,150. That made its per theater average $8,415, which is significantly higher than I thought it was going to be. And that's why, to me, it was pretty surprising that it did this well. 2-3 weeks ago, there were some rumblings that tracking was looking pretty good for this. There was a thought process that it's a horror movie opening in October, on Friday the 13th. It's not very often you get I don't know how often it happens, but it doesn't seem very often you get a Friday the 13th in October. So it seems like the perfect alignment of dates. And the fact that Blade Runner did not do very well last weekend at all, basically flopped, that got a lot of people excited about this movie and how it was going to do. I had thought it was going to push up into, and this is before I saw the theater counts, I thought it was going to push up into the 30s. Like, I thought that they would push it out really wide, take advantage, put it on 4,000 screens. Why the hell not? It's Friday the 13th weekend, just go for it. But they weren't able to do that. And so, if they had done that, and this is sort of completely hypothetical, let's say it was on 4,000 screens, and let's say, or 4,000 theaters, I should say, and let's say that per theater average, it's obviously going to drop because it's on more theaters. That's the assumption. Let's just say it does 8K per theater. You're looking at $32 million for the weekend. That was my thought process about a week ago. But when the theater counts came in, I was like, it's probably not going to do insanely well, just because it doesn't have the opportunity to do that well. If you don't have enough theaters playing it, it doesn't matter how well the film does, it's not going to break into the 30, 40, 50 range. But that all aside, Happy Death Day, really great performance. And it's kind of interesting to ask yourself why, right? Like, why is it that a $5 million, I would call that micro budget. Like, I know there's all these specific sort of ranges in terms of production budgets that would constitute a micro budget. It's probably under $1 million. I don't fucking care. It's a micro budget compared to wide releases. In the context of wide release Hollywood studio movies, this is about as small as you can possibly get for a budget. and still put it out. Now, obviously, they spent tens of $millions on marketing, like probably at least 30 to 40 million bucks on marketing, maybe more, just because it was kind of all over the place. So that production budget is dwarfed by its marketing budget, but it doesn't really change the fact that this film was only produced for about 5 million bucks. Compare that to Blade Runner, which was produced for 150, although insiders say about 170, 180, $180 million. That's just, and when you compare the performance, at the end of the day, like, Blade Runner might make 10, maybe 20 million more than Happy Death Day. But, when you take a look at the production budget, let's just assume conservatively it was only 150 for Blade Runner. You could have made 30 Happy Death Days for that. And this is one of the topics that I go into over and over again, and one of the reasons why I am kind of in awe and super respectful with what Jason Blum has done at Blumhouse Productions. He understands that you can make high quality products. I don't hate saying that term, but a movie at the end of the day, speaking about it in business terms, is a product. Are people going to go see it? Do they enjoy it? There's a certain customer satisfaction that you have to aim for, right? It is a product. And so Blumhouse and Jason Blum have figured out a way to create wide released, high quality, glossy products for 1/10 the cost of normal. That's sort of an industry revolution right there. And I don't think a lot of people, he gets a lot of respect. He was just on Bill Simmons' podcast, Jason Blum. Check that out. I have not listened to that episode yet. I'm really looking forward to listening to it. Should be very fascinating, because I would love to sort of pick his brain about what his thought process was in terms of, getting to this point where he's had, I believe, 3 movies this year, 3 horror movies, Get Out, Split, and now Happy Death Day, that have just, done so incredibly well on very small budgets. Get Out was 5 million, Split was, I think, 13 million production budget, and then Happy Day was only 5. So he's definitely figured out this, I don't want to say secret formula or magic formula, anything like that. I think it's actually very straightforward. He understands what makes a movie popular with people. He understands how to get people into the seat, and his company does, with the help of Universal's marketing arm. He gets it. He understands sort of the philosophy of the movie making business. And I think the rest of the industry should be looking at what he's doing and kind of picking it apart and trying to understand why he has been so successful and why his company, Blumhouse Productions, has been so successful. Now, one of the reasons is that he has focused on horror films, right? Happy Death Day seems like kind of a slightly creative take on a slasher genre. It's kind of a mixture of Groundhog Day. She wakes up in the same day over and over again, and then she gets killed at the end of the day, and she kind of has to figure out how to save herself, essentially. It sounds a lot like Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat, which was the graphic novel that was based on. So, not super, super creative, but kind of a twist on the slasher genre a bit. There's something about horror films, and they've always been this way, where you can make them for pretty cheap and people just show up and see them. People in general really like horror films, or at least there is a large segment of the population that loves to see them. And they usually go opening weekend, and it's all about the experience, right? It's about the experience of being scared, or as Wes Craven always used to say, the master of horror films, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, Last House on the Left. Wes Craven revolutionized the horror genre 3 times in his life over 3 decades. I mean, it still blows my mind that he did that. He used to always say that people go to horror films not to feel scared, but sort of release the fear inside of them. The film, in a sense, wasn't giving them something. It was allowing them to feel something that was already there. And I think that was a very, he's kind of a philosophical person. There's something really attractive about horror films for a lot of people, especially younger people. And that was, very true with Happy Death Day when you look at the audience score, or the sort of the audience demo breakdown. I think Variety had it listed in their article review. The audience was split 54 female to 46 male. That's surprising to me, just because I guess the main person or the main protagonist is a young woman in college, but I almost feel like that plays towards the male because she's a beautiful young woman. It sort of plays a little bit towards the male crowd, I thought, but I was wrong. Played a little bit better with females. 63% of the audience was under 25. 63%. That is insane. And so whereas Blade Runner, 63, or I think it was 69% of the audience, something crazy like that, was over 25 and male, I believe. Happy Death Day was like almost the exact opposite. Happy Death Day won the youth audience, and the youth audience is very powerful. They're not all powerful. The youth audience just by themselves can't put a movie into the $60-80 million range or $100 million range, but they're powerful enough to break out a movie like this. And I think there's no other way to really view this as sort of just another notch on the belt for Blumhouse Productions. They know what they're doing. They know how to create a movie for $5 million, market it in the right way, and get a great return on investment. Where's this going to end up? So it's at 26.5 right now. You're looking at probably not a 3x, just because it's a horror film. They tend to have pretty significant drops in the second, third, and fourth weekends. So let's just say it does like a 2.7 overall. You're looking at like $70 million, right? Like that's going to be a good play for them. I think at the end of the day, it just shows you the power of marketing, right? Like on a tiny film that was just shot for next to nothing, if you market it in the right way, it could make as much as a movie that costs $100 or $150 million to make. I mean, that's what's pretty crazy about the whole thing. Audience reactions in general to it, and speaking of the legs, 64% in Rotten Tomatoes right now. That'll stay there, it seems like. I don't think there's going to be a lot more reviews coming in. 74% audience score. Not terrible, not amazing. People didn't love it, but they weren't pissed off by it. They didn't think it was terrible. Cinema score came in at a B, which is pretty good for horror films. Not good overall. Usually horror films, for whatever reason, people go and see them are always pissed off by them. I don't know why they keep going to them, but it's just sort of this weird pattern. They go in expecting, I think, they expect some sort of thrill, and if they don't get that thrill, they usually ding the movie on the surveys. So a B cinema score, Metacritic, which probably isn't that relevant when you're talking about a horror film like this, 57% on Metacritic. So I think a pretty standard horror movie multiplier of like a 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. I don't see it going to the 3 range. Although, I know I'm just thinking about it, like we are 2 weeks away from Halloween. So maybe the next 2 weeks it could just really clean up. That is possible too. But it's got competition. It's got it. We got 4 movies coming out next week, and I think like 2-3 more the week after. It's going to be pretty busy. But a huge win for everybody involved with Happy Death Day, Universal, Blumhouse, Jason Blum, and that whole crew of people. Just they've got a formula that is ironically the mirror image of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Like Marvel gets, and Disney, Buena Vista, whatever, they understand how to create a movie for $150 million, $200 million, and make a massive, huge profit on that huge investment, right? And that entails a whole different business model than what Universal and Blumhouse is doing. They figured out a way to create a factory almost, in the same way that MCU is a factory for making these products, of making these micro budget films that can break out and make, I think Get Out made $175 million at the box office. So they got something really special, and it's going to be fun to watch how this film sort of plays out over the next few weeks. Okay, so that's Happy Death Day, number 1 winner. Everybody sort of expected that to happen. What I did not expect to happen is that the number 2 film, Blade Runner 2049, had a pretty steep drop, considering. Now, if this was any normal film, and it dropped 54% like Blade Runner did this weekend, coming in at $15.1 million for the weekend. A 54% drop, I'd say like, that's okay. For Blade Runner, I think it's actually really bad for a few reasons. One, the type of film that it is would suggest that it will play longer and have just longer legs in general. Adult, rated R, I would call it like a hardcore sci-fi film, extremely high quality, according to the critics and to a lot of people who have seen it. So that would suggest to me that this is going to play for a long time in the cinemas and have some really good 3x, 3.5x, 4x legs. That does not look like it's going to happen. If it's dropping 54% on the second weekend, maybe, just maybe, it's kind of the fanboy drop. You know, all the fanboys from Blade Runner, like myself, went to go see it opening weekend, and now that whole group of audience is sort of out of the picture, and the general audience is now sort of kicking in, and so you're going to see a significant drop, and maybe in its third and fourth weekend those drops will start to lower. That's like my personal hope that happens. I can't count on that happening though. It's still on 4,000 screens. That will not be the case next weekend, I will tell you that right now. Per theater average this weekend was 3,700. Total gross so far is 60 million. You know, and that's on a 150, more like $180 million production budget with at least $120 million marketing. They're going to be in real trouble. And I think the hit's going to go to Sony and Alcon. Alcon's probably going to go out of business because of it. That's what I've heard. I mean, I don't know if that's true. I don't have the P&L statement for Alcon Productions, but like that's sort of the rumor that I've heard on Deadline and stuff, is that like if this thing doesn't make $400 million worldwide, they're going to be in real trouble. Warner Brothers is like, whatever. You know, we just had it. Like, they don't really care. They're so massive that a hit like this isn't going to really set them back that much. I do think the performance of Blade Runner is, I don't want to say canary in the coal mine, but it suggests a wide variety of failures that happened in sort of the movie production system and the industry. I think the most glaring one is that how did you let that production budget get so high? Like, if this was shot for $40 to $50 million, which I think it could have, would it change the entire look of the film and how it was made? Absolutely. But that's the business, right? If you gave Denny 40, 50 million, 60 million bucks, I think he could have made something really special. It would have been a lot smaller of a film and a lot smaller of a story, but I think it would have made a profit, right? And now that with this flaming car wreck of a disaster, the Blade Runner series is essentially over. I don't see how they're ever going to resurrect it. I think a TV show would be amazing for Blade Runner. I kind of wish they had gone that direction originally with trying to, revitalize the genre or the series I guess it's a genre in a series, cyberpunk. I think it should be a TV show. Should have been. So the failure was allowing that production budget to get that high, and baked within that is the lack of market awareness, right? Like, I would have loved to see some customer surveys, or just, surveys of people in general in the United States, across a lot of different demographics. It's not that hard to do. You can do it on Google for like 50 cents an answer, or survey. And just see, like, who knows what Blade Runner is? How familiar are they with Blade Runner? I would have loved to see a ton of market research before anybody put pen to paper and put this movie in motion. Just because I know my viewpoint of the film and its popularity was very skewed because I'm a huge nerd and I really like the original. And I think the original I thought it was this very highly respected, popular film with a nerd culture, and I was completely wrong. It certainly is a popular film within a certain sect of the nerd world, probably my little corner of that, which is probably a little more old school, like was a nerd before the year 2000, And you could see that in the audience. Like, it was all over 30-year-old males who are going to see this. But outside of that, not very popular. I feel like that would have shown up on a survey, or, you know, a collection of surveys would have showed you that nobody under the age of 25 is going to see this movie. And that way you wouldn't spend $180 million producing it and then, you know, 150 on marketing. Like, so just a pretty big failure for everybody involved. And it's too bad considering that people really loved the film. I personally did not like it that much. I got to go see it again to get a real in-depth sort of look at it. I felt it was very long, really poorly edited, and I don't mean that in terms of skill. I mean that in terms of the philosophy of how they edited it. It was sort of like super long takes. You know, there was a cut every 20 seconds instead of every 3 seconds, like a normal film. And so maybe that style just did not connect. It seemed like it connected with the people who saw it, but maybe just disinterested the rest of the mass audience or something. In any event, Blade Runner is a complete failure. Its drop this weekend is awful. Had a pretty good week, but 54% drop for a film like this is just solidifying how much of a flop of it's going to end up being. So that's too bad. And next up, we have in number 3 slot, The Foreigner. I really underestimated this one. I said like $8 million for this. Ended up at 12.8, almost $13 million for the Jackie Chan action movie on 2,500 screens. Per theater average was about $5,100 per theater. This just, I don't know, it seemed to overperform, and I can't figure out why. I didn't know who the audience was for this. I thought there was no audience. 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score was 80%, so people went to go see it, really liked it. I should have followed my gut a little more with that. The Rotten Tomato want to see score was like over 9,000, I think, or something. And I didn't really take that into account. So there definitely was an audience for this that I didn't see. I wonder if there's any sort of, I wish there was more demographic information on this film. It's done $88 million overseas so far. Cost $35 million to make. Director was Martin Campbell. He's kind of the big James Bond director. Worked a lot with when Pierce Brosnan was James Bond. And so that had a really great performance. Over $5,000 per theater for this film is good. And this is SDX production. They're sort of like backed by a lot of Chinese money. And so they rolled it out right. And I didn't see a ton of marketing for it. But it apparently connected with the right people. Now, is this a huge breakout performance? No, it's not. $5,000 per theater is good. It's not fantastic, right? And so with the higher quality, though, and I'm kind of wondering where it's going to end up. Let's just pump it up to 13. Could have a 3x multiplier. Could leg it out to 40 million, which is not bad. But I think I get the impression that The Foreigner was not really that focused, or STX wasn't that focused on the US market for this. I think it was probably more like the cherry on top, and they were more interested in doing well overseas in Asia and getting a lot of money there, and that was probably their primary focus and market for this film. So the fact that it's doing well in America is sort of just a nice little added cushion to their profit for this one. So that was number 3. Number 4 was It this weekend. $6 million. Fantastic 39% drop. That's the sort of drop that I was looking for Blade Runner. It just did not happen. 39% drop. Lost about 400 theaters. Still on about 3,200 theaters. Per theater average in its 6th weekend is $1,900. Total take so far, $315 million, just about. I'm rounding up. $315 million for it. It is the number 1 horror film of all time. And I don't really see it going away in the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to play strong through Halloween. Where does that put it on the year-end list? Let's take a look real quick at that. It's got to be up there. It's in the top 5 now, so it's just above. Just below Spider-Man: Homecoming, which has had really crazy legs. I don't understand how it had that sort of lower opening weekend, really bad drop second weekend, and then has just slowly glided to $333 million. Really great sort of later performance from Spider-Man. It's underneath that at 314. Spider-Man's at 333. Guardians 389. Wonder Woman at 412. Beauty and the Beast at 504. So it's already in the top 5. It's gonna have a lot of competition though. You got Thor, Justice League, and of course Star Wars, right? And so by the end of the year, it's definitely going to be top 10. I don't think it should be able to beat Spider-Man pretty easily, I think. Can it get all the way up to Guardians? I don't know about that. But it's on at least a hopefully top 7 performance on the year. With the monsters coming out later in the year, it's going to be hard for it won't be top 5, I think, unless Thor underperforms. I feel like Thor could underperform. I think Thor could open up at like 100, really pop off, and then have like a 2.5 multiplier. So it is possible that it will beat Thor. I just can't tell with a movie like that. It seems like a lot of fun. Reviews are great, but it feels very campy and throwaway, which I think will really make the comic book movie and younger audiences happy. But it's not going to pull anybody outside of that. So that's why I say the Thor's multiplier is going to be pretty poor, I think. More on the Ultron, Captain America, Civil War sort of realm. It plays to a very specific audience, and there's not many other people outside of that audience. That's my thought process with that one. So it's fantastic. I guess the whole point of that little rant was it's doing really well. Should end up in the top 7 for the year. But it is the number 1 horror film of all time, so that's nothing to sort of like cast aside and say, oh, it's not going to make the top 5. Who cares? Like, it's the top horror movie of all time. It's amazing. Number 5 this weekend was The Mountains Between Us from Fox. Kate Winslet and Idris Elba. PG-13 kind of romantic drama about them being in a plane crash and trying to survive together. 46% drop. That's high. That's way too high for a movie like this. I would want this to be in near the 40 range, like about 40%. I would be happy with if I was Fox, although I'm not. Added about 171 theaters. Per theater average was about $1,700. And its second week, it has made $20.5 million so far. Budget was about 35. This is definitely a middling performance for this film. If the drops keep happening like that, it's not going to end up doing too well at the end of the day. But it's not necessarily a flop. If I'm using baseball analogies, it's kind of like maybe like a single that the runner has to like really haul it, and it's like a tie at first base, and tie goes to the runner. It's that kind of performance. It's like, all right, like you made it barely. It didn't really break out. I thought it was going to break out. I thought it was going to do a lot more than this, just because I love the 2 leads. It seemed like a really interesting story. I don't know. I feel like the romantic movies have been, I don't know, underutilized. That genre has been sort of underutilized, I feel like, for the last few years. Like, there just has not been a lot of great sort of pure adult romance movies that have been coming out. And the big one this year is Big Sick, but that only made like $40 million. Like, that's not like, I think they spent a ton on marketing that film. That's nothing to write home about. I feel like people have been saying, oh, the Big Sick, broke out. It didn't really break out. Like, it did well with a very specific audience. It did not break out into the mass audiences at all that much, I would say. So I was expecting a romance film to really sort of make a really big play this year, and it's not happening, unfortunately. But that Mountains Between Us was number 5 for the weekend. Number 6 was American Made, the Tom Cruise Drug Runner movie from Universal, 5.4 million. Great drop, 36%. That's the kind of drop you want to see for a movie like this. 3,100 theaters. Per theater average was $17.50. Total take so far for American Made was $40.1 million. Kind of a higher production budget, but it is doing well overseas. Performance in this one, I would say just a little bit better than middling. Not fantastic, not terrible. Kind of just, if we're sticking with baseball analogies, kind of like a blooper single. Got on first, pretty good. Number 7 was Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Also a great drop. We had some really good drops this weekend. $5.3 million for the weekend, 39% drop. Lost 500 screens or theaters. Still in about 3,000 theaters this weekend. 1782 is the per theater average. Just about to break 90 million bucks in its fourth weekend. I thought this one was going to have trouble making it to 100 million, but I was, of course, wrong. It should have no problem getting over 100 million bucks, and will play, I think, pretty well until we get to Thor, and then I think its audience is pretty much gone. Number 8 this weekend was the Lego movie named Django. 4.3 million. Good drop, 38%. What you want to see for a children's film. Per theater average was $14.13. And its fourth weekend, $51.5 million so far. This one's a huge flop. Everybody sees it as that. There's no real other way to look at it. It was a minor movie that played like a minor movie and has even underwhelmed those expectations in terms of its box office performance. So I don't think we're going to be seeing any sort of Lego outside the main canon, if you will, the mainline story of Lego 2, the movie, which is coming out, I think, not next year, maybe 2019. I don't even know. I don't think we're going to see a lot of the offshoot movies like the Batman in this one. I think that train has left the station based on this performance. Number 9 was My Little Pony, the movie, $4 million. Massive drop, 55% for a children's film. That's awful. Didn't lose any theaters either. Per theater average was $15.82. Total take so far after 2 weeks is $15.5 million. Not a great performance. Not sure what the production budget was. That massive drop in the second weekend is not good. That just kind of spells doom for this film. It's not going to make any money in its later weekends. It doesn't look like. So this one will disappear quite rapidly because that entire fan base is essentially all used up now. It's done. And so I expect to see 50% drops and higher all the way down until it's sort of out of theaters in the next few weeks. I can't really tell, like, if they made it for like a couple of $1 million, maybe this could be a good performance for them, but I don't think it cost that little. It probably cost at least $5 million, $10 million to make. So I don't think they're going to be very happy with that performance overall. Number 10 was Victoria and Abdul, the sort of limited release that has been playing quite well from Focus Features. 3.1 million this weekend. A wonderful, wonderful 25% drop. You love to see drops like that. I mean, that's just so cool. On 900 screens, per theater average was about $3,500. Total take so far for this limited release gone wide, and its fourth weekend is $11.3 million. I don't know where this one's going to go, though, right? Like, I don't know. It only added 168 screens. It's on 900. Per theater average is kind of in that range where you're like, ugh. For a limited release, if this was on, 3,000 theaters and it was doing 3,500 per theater, I'd be a little bit happier about it. But I think this is honestly the best case scenario for a film like this. It didn't really seem to have an audience. I guarantee you, if I looked at the demos for this film, who went to go see it, I would say 80% over 50. I feel like it's just playing to that elderly crowd. Not even really elderly. I guess if you're over 50, that is pretty decently old, but not elderly. There's not a lot out there for people over 50 at the movie theaters these days, and hasn't been for years. So when a movie like this comes along, I feel like Hidden Figures was another one that really played with that group. They're definitely an underserved demographic, I think, is older moviegoers. They don't go that much. If you look at the MPA data, people over like 60, they just don't go to movies that much. But when they do go, I feel like they all go to the same movie at the same time. You know what I mean? So Victoria and Abdul is doing, I think, about as well as it possibly could for a film like this, just because nobody under 50 is going to see it, essentially. So that's the top 10. Some sort of outside the top 10 numbers to talk about. Marshall did pretty well. Opened on 821 theaters. Ended up at $3,700 per theater. Total take was just north of 3 million. Not a bad performance. Open road films is kind of a mess these days. No one knows if they really exist or not anymore, if they're going to exist in 6 months. So I think 3 million is not too bad for this. Now, if it was under a different studio with like a real marketing push, and maybe I wonder what the quality was on this, because I'm kind of surprised. 87% in Rotten Tomatoes. That is surprising. So 87% in Rotten Tomatoes. It's like 85% audience score. I wonder what the cinema score, or the cinema score didn't do one for this one, unfortunately. Metacritic is really going to tell me a lot, though. 66% on Metacritic. Okay, I kind of see what happened here. And the actual rating from critics on Rotten Tomatoes is 6.8, kind of like 68% almost. So what I'm seeing here is that it just wasn't good enough for awards contention, is what I'm seeing. And so if like a major studio had it and wanted to push it out, I think it could have done a lot better than what it's doing. But, considering the fact that it's open road films, only opened on 800 screens, it's doing okay. Production budget was about 12 million on this one. I just think with a different studio and like a real, $20, $30, $40 million marketing campaign that focused on maybe awards and its prestige, it could have done a lot better. But they just didn't put the money behind it so it could be successful. What else is going on outside the top 10? Battle of the Sexes just sort of fell off the face of the earth, to be honest with you. Did 1.375 million for the weekend. I still haven't seen it yet. I want to see it. 46% drop. That's way too high for a movie like this. That's probably because it lost 400 screens. Per theater average is below the Mendoza line for a limited sort of arty release, under $1,000, just under $1,000. Total take so far on its fourth weekend, 10.4 million. I had really high hopes for this. Fox Searchlight, director of Little Miss Sunshine, or directors, I think. Let's do directors with a check. Two directors, Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris. They did Little Miss Sunshine. Like this one, I felt was going to break out. Really hot actress. I don't mean that in terms of looks, but in terms of her sort of popularity now. Emma Stone, Steve Carell, Elizabeth Shue's in there, Sarah Silverman. Really, really great cast. Bill Pullman, wonderful. I don't know what happened with this one. I talked about it a few times over the last couple of weeks. It just kind of maybe confused me, and I think it got lost. It came out in the middle of September. September is a rough month for movies in general. This year was the exception with it, but it was a huge exception. Art films in the middle of September, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it really had a good chance. If this opened later this year, if it opened like end of October, I think it would have done a little bit better because it would be closer to award season. This definitely has the prestige sort of twee indie feel to it that I think would play well with the Academy. But I think they screwed up their release time on this one. People just haven't found it, or aren't. It's either they haven't found it or they're not interested in seeing it. And I think with the stars involved and the high quality of the marketing, I feel like it's more like they just didn't find it, right? I think if there's a little bit more exposure to it in the right time of year, it would have done, I think, significantly better. So that's kind of been a limited release failure. A wide release failure that I talked a little bit about on the preview show is Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman from Annapurna Films. They just, I don't know. I don't want to say they can't catch a break because they're just making really poor decisions. This was a really stupid movie to put out. I don't understand why they did it. I have nothing against the subject matter or anything like that. It just, there was zero audience for this. And it has to have one of the worst openings ever for a film on over 1,000 screens. Its per theater average was $600 per theater on over 1,200 screens, or theaters, I should say. Its total take was $737,000. I mean, just I feel like I have to take a look now and see if it's one of the worst per theater averages of all time for an opener, especially wide like that. We'll have to check Box Office Mojo here real quick. I just don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. I remember when the film was announced, it just didn't really make any sense to me whatsoever, what they were trying to accomplish. Yeah, if you're looking at like over 600 screens, it is, they don't really give me the average here. I kind of want to see the lowest average. It is not even really in the top 20 about, yeah, maybe like top 30 all time. God, so bad, terrible. I don't know. What do you expect though? What was the audience? Who was going to go see this? Wonder Woman fans? I mean, not even though, right? Like, so it's like, I don't know what Annapurna is doing, the Bruckner studio, or Megan Ellison. I don't know where her head's at. They just seemed like a very, very poor release. And they've had nothing but, pretty terrible releases this year. And I guess they did like joint releases before or something, because they've been around for a while. But Detroit was a massive flop. Brad's Status was completely non-existent. It came out about a month ago. And this is just an epic disaster. I don't know what Annapurna's doing. They got to figure something out, or like choose different movies to make, or maybe market them better. It just didn't really make a lot of sense what was going on with this film and why they were even putting it out. What else is going on? Goodbye Christopher Robin came out, also Fox Searchlight. Man, like Fox Searchlight needs to get its head straight, because they're releasing what looks like really good, high quality movies. This one looks really good. It's got Margot Robbie. She's like, one of the hottest actresses out there right now. And it just didn't really connect with anybody. So it opens limited on 9 theaters this weekend. Only 6,000 per theater. Like that's really, really bad. Like that's horrifically bad for just that limited of a release and an opening. So yowzers. I don't know what's going on at Fox Searchlight. They need to like fire their marketing department and hire me, because I'll do a better job than they would. But anyway, I'm just fucking joking around. But terrible performance for that. Breathe. My mom told me about this film. I didn't know that was coming out. She's like, oh, I saw Andrew Garfield on TV about this guy, the doctor who created the polio vaccine, and he actually infected himself with polio or something and then used the vaccine. I don't know. The dude was crazy, but like kind of a hero in the medical community or something like that. And this is all my take on it. I could be all wrong, by the way. I don't know. Bleecker Street, I don't know what their deal is. They put this out limited release. I think it was supposed to be for awards noms. 4 theaters, $6,500 per theater. Absolutely terrible performance, horrific even. So a lot of like limited releases have failed. The biggest ones, limited releases, I think in sort of recent memory in the last few months, like you're thinking even some like 47 Meters Down, which is not an art film limited release, but was sort of like kind of thrown out there after it was supposed to be on VOD, and like it just like did really well. I don't know how that film did well. I saw it, I was like, it's fine. But it was successful, very successful for them in their release. Big Sick did well, limited to wide, although not great. You know, I think I'm of two minds with Big Sick. On the one hand, I think people are propping it up as this huge success. I think that's false, right? Like, if Big Sick was truly an indie film and didn't have Amazon Studios backing it and fronting $25-30 million for marketing, and it made the $40 million it made, I'd be like, oh man, that's a really great performance, really breakout. The fact that they marketed it so heavily and really pushed it out into sort of the mid markets and smaller markets, and it didn't really stick, to me it feels a little bit underwhelming. But that's when you have that context of that it's Amazon Studios, they're spending all this tens of millions of dollars to market it. It doesn't really feel that small of a film anymore, does it? Right? So I kind of judged it almost as kind of a more sort of mid-wide release. I think the biggest limited release winner was going to be Wind River the last couple of months. You know, made for $11 million. Tyler Sheridan, Hell or High Water screenwriter, Sicario screenwriter, makes his, I guess, first movie, and they randomly opened it up in like August, and I was kind of making fun of him for it, but I was proven totally wrong. It's made $33.4 million, and that's from the Weinstein Company, and my God, like, they're all screwed right now. That sucks. That kind of sucks for them, because I think Wind River had a good chance of winning a couple Oscars. But now, because of all the scandals with Harvey Weinstein, I don't think any Weinstein film's going to win anything, just because the Academy doesn't want to look like they're condoning his behavior or something. But there are not a ton of, I guess the whole point of this trap in my mind here is like limited releases have just sucked recently. And there have not been hardly any big winners in the last couple of months. I think Victorian Abdul is doing okay. Battle of Sex is a failure. Stronger's a failure. Marshall in context is okay, but it's essentially a failure. Ingrid Goes West, failure. Tulip Feather, failure. I mean, it goes on and on. Brad Status, failure. I don't know what's going on with limited releases. It's a kind of an ongoing topic that I talk about on the podcast, just in terms of where do they fit in now? Where does an art house limited release fit in? Can they really break out anymore? I think Big Sick to me is the prime example of the best you can really do as a limited art house release right now, without really breaking into a mass audience. I want to see a film that is rolled out slowly, theater by theater, you know, city by city, make $100 million or $150 million. I haven't seen that anytime recently at all. And so that model from indie to mainstream huge success doesn't seem as viable as it did 15, 20 years ago, if it's viable at all anymore. So just something to know, and sort of a pattern that's happening. Speaking of another limited failure is the Florida Project, which was supposed to be this massive, huge Oscar film, and it's not doing anything. I can't even find it on the list. Where is it? Is it 40th? Is it 50th? Where did it go? 16th actually. A24, who for all intents and purposes is essentially a tiny little art house production firm, or studio, I should say, or distribute. I don't know if they really produce those films, or they just buy them for distribution. Added 29 screens, only did 12,000 per theater. Better than the other limited releases we talked about, but not great at all. It's not going to break out. So that's sort of the rundown. Let's like unpack everything and sort of get some big takeaways for the weekend. Happy Death Day, fantastic performance. Blumhouse is on a roll. He's created almost like a new model for making movies. You can make massively successful movies for very little money, right? Like he's solved that riddle, right? He's figured it out, and so he's continuing to have success with a new breakout, Happy Death Day. Blade Runner, terrible performance, continuing to flop in that second weekend. No good news there. Foreigner with a little bit of a tiny little breakout performance, not massively huge, but good enough to make SDX pretty happy. and a lot of limited release failures going into this sort of final 2 weeks here before Halloween. Let's take a look and see what's coming out this weekend. We got Geostorm, which I don't know. It's opening on 3,000 screens plus, so it's going to be a super saturated release. I feel like they could push it on 4,000 screens. Why not? What are you going to compete with? Happy Death Day, I think, is going to have a pretty massive drop, like 50. No, I'm thinking like 60, 65%. This is the nature of horror films. So you're going to have wide open BR. Blade Runner's done terribly. That's going to be gone from like 1,000 theaters next weekend. A lot of space to play in for Geostorm. Only the Brave is the firefighter movie. That's going to break out. Like, you have these massive forest fires happening in California. You got over 40 people dead, probably going to be in the 100 at least dead. Whole parts of Santa Rosa just gone. The north part of the city just burnt up. Thousands of homes gone. And I think Only the Brave sort of talks about that and is all about that topic. I think, not that they planned that or would even, maybe they're secretly, it's like, oh, this is really going to help us, but I don't think they feel really good about that. Although maybe I'm a little too naive and optimistic about the people in Hollywood. But Only the Brave's going to break out. There's no doubt in my mind. To open on 2,400 screens, a lot of older people want to see that movie. I would say over 40. It's going to play very well. Same kind of different as Me from Pure Flix. I don't really know this one. I guess it is, I don't know. Is that Greg Kinnear? Is he in that? What is Greg Kinnear doing these days? Yeah, Greg Kinnear, Renee Zellweger, John Voight. Looks like a religious film to me. That's not going to do anything. It's a completely irrelevant film going on. I don't know why I mentioned it. Snowman's coming out only on 1,800 theaters. I don't know why they're doing a limited wide on that one. They certainly marketed it incessantly over the last 3 months. I've seen that trailer like 600 times. I don't know how that one's going to do. Tyler Paley's Boo 2, Medea Halloween, coming out about 2,300 screens next weekend. I think that one's going to flop. Last year, the first one did very well, broke out, had over a 12,000 per theater average. I was just like, blew my mind how well it did. I don't see that happening again. I think a lot of people saw that, maybe felt kind of burnt by it. I don't know. I tried to watch it. I thought it was unwatchable. The quality was very, very poor for a wide release. So I don't think he's going to repeat the success of the first one with the second one. So we have 5 wide releases coming out this weekend. It's busy, and then 4 more the weekend after. All I see is You probably doesn't count because it's open road films, probably not super wide. But you got Suburbicon, you got Jigsaw, you got Thank You for Your Service. Those are all wide releases. And then we're going to go into Thor on the 3rd of November. So pretty busy coming up. I will do, because there's a lot of releases coming out, so I'm definitely going to do a preview show. I'm going to try and do it on Wednesday and post it on Wednesday night, just so it's there before stuff opens on Thursday. In any event, guys, thanks for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast. I will be back later in the week.